our parents made a lot of sacrifices to accomplish what they did. And now we're in a position where we have a platform. We can talk about our experiences and then we can give back and prepare the next generation.
I think there's an intense guilt in Latina children.
The way that you spend money, the way that you use money is a reflection of who you are as a person.
Financial literacy could make or break us. This is a very special episode, and I'm so glad it's our first episode. I think as a first generation couple, as individuals, there's just so many topics, a plethora we can discuss of what it means to grow up first gen in America. And doing this podcast, I just really wanted to just do something special where people can feel that they can have a positive role model of a couple, because I feel like we've done really great for ourselves given our upbringings, the circumstances we grew up in. And to make this podcast as kind of like our first child from that, I felt like what better way than talk about as a couple one of the most like hard-hitting, emotional, controversial topics. And I feel like that's money. And I think for our first podcast, the theme I want to go with and discuss with you is how generational trauma shows up in our financial habits. How can healing emotionally also help us when it comes to our relationship with money?
Yeah, I think it's really important. In a way, it's kind of like giving back, right? We're first generation. So our parents made a lot of sacrifices to accomplish what they did, bringing us here to the United States and, us being born in the United States. And now we're in a position where, we have a platform, we can talk about our experiences, and then we can give back and prepare the next generation, or even just empower the current generation that might not have had a platform or community where they can talk about stuff like this. Super important.
No, I absolutely agree. Talking about the platform and how special is that just all these circumstances. So my family, my mother immigrated from El Salvador and my father immigrated from Mexico. I think about all the things they went through just for us to create this life for ourselves and now sharing our story. And I'm so excited to get into it because I feel so just... Sorry, I'm also so nervous, but I feel like this nervousness is also excitement to talk about this. And talking about money is going to bring these reactions out of me. This is not the first time I speak with such anxiety. It's very anxiety driven. So, and because of that, this makes it all the more important. As a first-gen Latina, money is unfortunately one of the most like controversial things like I could have talked about growing up, or I could have thought about growing up. In my case, it's one of the most traumatic in my upbringing. And this is it's insane to know how it became such a delicate subject, not only with me, but I'm sure so many other kids that were growing up, especially in the '08 crisis. Like I see memes on it on the internet about the money stress as a child, that you don't understand what's going on, but your parents are fighting. Like whether it's that example or if just growing up in an immigrant household and not having enough and getting your bearings together in America, it's insane how it feels nearly taboo, but financial literacy could make or break us. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to talk about. But somehow I know it's important to talk about, but why is it that I feel this impending doom when the topic is brought up? And I just really want to unpack that today. I want to unpack how our family survival and the mindset around money has shaped us, and how us knowing how it shaped us, how can we build wealth in a place from peace and security instead of fear.
Yeah. There's so much gold that you just dropped in there, and there's a lot of ground to cover. I mean, why don't we just start off? What do you think is the first thing that we should start with?
Well, okay. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is essentially give a little bit more background of let's tackle it. Where does this anxiety come from? Where does this fear come from? And I want to share this story because I hope that someone can relate, or someone maybe hears me and like, okay, maybe it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of us grow up in I'm going to say my experience. I don't want to speak for every single Latino, person out there, but growing up in my experience, it was very much scarcity mindset. Like there's never enough and we should save everything. And then I feel like that's great advice, but it was never taught like, well, how? How do I save? Like, what do you mean everything? Like, how do I save for example, for me, I was never taught how to save for college. So I applied for scholarships. I also got a student loan. And it's all these things that I can relate back to my childhood. Like, oh, I wish someone taught me how to save. And I think when you're taught with such scarcity mindset, I think it brings a lot of guilt. It brings a lot of guilt in a child. And especially, I think it brings a lot of, to make it even more, to get more in depth about it or more particular about that fear. I think there's an intense guilt in Latina children and young girls. It's an intense guilt of spending money for yourself, because I feel like women, we carry such a burden of like wanting to be the comforters in our family, the providers in our family. And it's such an intense fear. And I feel that. And I have felt guilty so many times in my life where I can experience something beautiful and a wave of grief crashes over me. Mm-hmm. And another emotional side that I want to talk about is that we need to discuss this connection of our trauma and control. Like, why do we feel this need to get control and from such an anxious standpoint versus taking control with safety, like taking control of confidence? Sorry, I got a little carried away there. But yeah, and then the other emotional side to it too that I really want people to understand is that while we're discussing our story, I also want people to understand that this isn't something that, thank God, like thank the universe that we're not the first people to question this. Mm-hmm. We are living in such an incredible time where there's more studies coming out about how the relationship with money affects, how the relationship of money is born out of our upbringing. It's born out of not just genetics, like upbringing. How does your environment also contribute? And it's just insane talking about, there's so much to talk about when it comes to this topic, mm-hmm. but I want people to understand that we are in a time where all of these fears, they're validated. These are not just some guilt trips that we conjured out of thin air. This is all valid. In 2021, I told you about this study. 2021, there's a study. I'm terrible with names. Okay, Harder, and we'll link the study. I'll link the study. I'll be sure to do my due diligence on that. But there was a study that found that people with higher child adversity traumas, like they reported more adult financial stress. So just for people that don't know. Mm-hmm. Generational trauma. Generational trauma is the transmission of psychological, emotional effects. And these traumatic experiences are believed to be passed down from one generation to another. With that, it's so many studies, psychologists had been advocating how the upbringing of children and the traumas we experience affect us later on. In doctor's office, we now take, the ACE test, and that's the Adverse Childhood Experience test. And it's basically taking inventory. What have you gone through? So then doctors can know like how this is affecting your life now. Mm-hmm. And with that, there was a study conducted to see if people that have scored particularly high, which is not good, it's not great, and how does that affect them? And yeah, a lot of people, it's like to no surprise, there was higher financial stress. And because of that, like with everything that I've said, it's so much. But I just want to pass on like this question to you. Like, do you feel like with everything I've said, do you feel like you relate to this? Like, do you feel like you're living in this kind of fear that your parents may have instilled about money?
Yeah, no, there's so much to build on what you just said. I guess I'll start by providing a little bit of background about what it was like for me to grow up and how my parents handled their finances and their money. So both my parents immigrated. My mom's family is from Mexico. My dad is from Peru. And I grew up in a very entrepreneurial household. And so for us, money was a reflection of really how hard they were willing to work to earn that money. It's hard to compare maybe to our generation now about what the economy might have looked like. But I know that before 2008, things were going really well. And then during 2008, they weren't going so well anymore. And so my parents, they had made an effort, of course, to make things work as best they could. And I grew up with 4 other siblings, so 5 of us total, 5 kids, 2 adults. And what I had realized as a young child was that whether or not we were, I would say we were pretty solidly like a middle class family, middle income. And but then during 2008, things had changed. Our lifestyle had changed as a result of everything that was going on in the economy. And I think my parents did a really good job of making sure that as kids, we didn't feel that too much. We did change, of course, the spending habits, maybe not going out to restaurants as much, not getting as many toys, that kind of stuff. But they did a really good job of not impacting our childhood and the care and love that they wanted to show us. Overall, there's so many ways to go about this conversation, but money is very emotional. It's very emotionally linked, I think, to humans and kind of the mind and the brain and how we perceive it. Ultimately, it's also a tool as well. I think money, the way that you spend money, the way that you use money is a reflection of who you are as a person. And so whether you have money or you have an abundant amount of money or you don't, when you're providing for your family, let's say, they're going to feel your love, whether that's with an abundance of money or without an abundance of money, because it's how you do it, it's what you do, it's how you use it, more than it is how much you spend, what you purchase, those kinds of things. So that's a little bit of kind of my perspective coming into the conversation about finances. I think I'll also provide some context to our listeners too, because I think it's important to know we live in Southern California. Southern California is considered a higher cost of living area in the United States. And so our experience is tailored from that perspective compared to if we were living in the Midwest or somewhere on the East Coast too, which can be pretty different. I mean, I read a lot on Reddit. I'm a CPA, right? I'm an accountant, so I hang out in the accounting subreddits, and people are talking about their wages in entry-level positions, and the way that it ranges from a high cost of living to a low cost of living space is significant. I mean, sometimes it's $20,000 to $30,000 difference in an annual salary, and that's not even talking about benefits or anything like that. So rent in New York, is going to be much different than rent in, let's say, Arkansas or something like that. And I've talked to accountants from those spaces as well about their personal living expenses. And fortunately, we were comfortable enough to do that. You were talking about the kind of the taboo, the trauma of talking about, your finances. And I think me being an accountant, it's something that I had to unlearn this is something that's important to talk about. Money is important. Let's break down the taboo surrounding that conversation. So I'm really excited for, what the next topic that we might talk about is, because there's a lot of diverse perspectives just amongst us two ourselves here. And I can't wait to see, what the audience has to say too.
Yeah, no, your story, I just feel like, to me, it's just like insane, like the accessibility we have to the internet. And again, like we mentioned it earlier and you mentioned it in your story, it is completely, utterly heartbreaking how many kids carry that trauma from 2008, I feel. And it's insane to know like that you're not the first, you're not the last. And I'm so happy that we can talk about this. My traumas are like similar, but also widely different than what you went through and how it has affected my relationship with money. But the fact that you can grow from that and then become a CPA and have this new level, talk about first gen excellence, where you have this insane perspective now that is complete 180, and you are now willing to not only grow within yourself and heal, but you want to help others as well. And that is so important. And selfishly, I'm excited, and I know all of my girlfriends are excited because now we have someone to talk to when it comes to all of our money questions. And
it's important. Knowledge is power.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I think, and you have experience, of course, with the U.S. education system. They don't teach you about credit cards and managing debt and credit score and how that affects your ability to get a house and provide and budget for your family. It's super important, super important.
No, and I will add to that about the education system. Finances in high school was an extracurricular, and I widely disagree that it should be an extracurricular. I think it should be mandatory for kids. I was the kid that was living off of my father's Social Security. I did not have financial stability. And with what he had when he passed away, it was very little. Like I had no idea, how do you process grief as a middle schooler? How do you process grief in high school? And how do you get your bearings in order so you can, at 18, you're now considered a full-fledged adult all of a sudden. And at 18, all of a sudden, I carry the weight of what it is to have a loan in America to get into college. I wish that having these finance courses, I didn't take them. They did not interest me as much as it interested me stacking up my extracurriculars so I look good for college. Finance isn't an AP class. It's not an IB class. So when you pass this class, you take one of the most valuable information that you will use for the rest of your life. But in that moment, as a 17-year-old in high school, my main priority was, which classes are going to take me to college? When I get to college, what's going to help me with credits? What can help me to not stay in college as long so I don't take so many student loans for a long time? Or I have more money so I can buy my books or anything that I need, even to feed myself. I took a loan out so I can buy the cafeteria lunch card, if you remember that.
Yep.
And how I wish it was a mandatory thing where it could be added at any point, like health class. Health class was a mandatory class that's super important, but they allow you to take that during the summer. I wish finance was also something that was mandatory and you can take it over the summer. And I feel like that would have made a world of a difference of preparing me for the future. So I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah, no.
I could rant a lot about just the school systems.
Yeah, of course.
And then my background, because you mentioned you were a CPA, my background is I went to Cal State Fullerton and I graduated with American Studies degree. And for people that don't know what it is, because it's fairly new, it was born, I believe, out of the Civil War. Not the Civil War, sorry. My gosh, that's hilarious that he said that. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was like Civil War. No, so my major was born, yes, during the Cold War. That's when essentially it started coming into full gears and introduced to universities. And basically my major is, if you want to know what makes America America and all its glory and all the shame as well, there's a lot of parts of our history that we're not proud, that we should not be proud of. And there's a lot of parts of our history that make us so unique and triumphant. I know I embrace, that was my academia. We study the ins and outs of it. And what I love about my major is we're not studying it from necessarily the winners of history, which primarily are going to be the white counterparts, but we study it in also the perspective of immigrant backgrounds, of immigrants that make this country what it is, and just the beauty of how united we made such a powerful nation. And so I know the ins and outs essentially of how, for example, how the Latino community has contributed to our culture, how the Japanese community has contributed to our culture, and how the Black community continues to contribute to our culture. They are absolutely the blueprint for so much, and we owe them so much. That's what my major is. And it applies to the way we look at law. It applies the way we look at politics. And in this case, I feel like my knowledge that I gain in college, in this case, I feel like it applies to how we think about money. It's no coincidence that people of color may feel some type of way and it's negative when it comes to building generational wealth. Like, where do we begin with? And I see this in the prime example is that all of my friends have asked me finance questions. It literally feels like we're all it's just, you can't ignore the same group. We're all children of immigrant families. And all of my girlfriends have asked me questions that I'm going to go ahead and ask you. Yeah. But it all comes from that same place of wait, no one ever taught me this. No one ever taught me this. I know that your husband's a CPA. Can he help me out? And I'm happy to get into that with you. And so I have a couple of questions, and I feel like you are free to take it where you need to take it. It's your expertise here. But the first question, are you ready for the question?
Yeah, let's do it.
the first question I want to ask. So, as a CPA, so you as a CPA, what patterns are you currently observing with your first gen clients in money?
Yeah, that's a great question. And let me first start out by establishing what a CPA is. Some people might not even know what a CPA is, which is totally normal too. So stands for Certified Public Accountant. They are accountants that are licensed by the state, similar to like the bar in each state governing, lawyers. We have the California Board of Accountancy that governs CPAs in California. Becoming a CPA requires typically about 5 years of accounting studies at a university. So it's 150 credit hours is what it's called. Requires rigorous tests. There's 4 exams across a different range of topics, including tax law, auditing, so reviewing financial statements, financial accounting and reporting, and then business economics and different concepts surrounding that. Each CPA that's licensed is pretty knowledgeable. They're considered experts in specific fields when it comes to accounting and finances. Breaking down this question, can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry, I just wanted to establish that.
Of course. So thank you for introducing your expertise.
Yeah.
So what patterns do you notice between your first gen clients and money?
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So the most common trend that I see across first generation, Americans, they were born here or they immigrated here, is heavy conservatism. Conservatism in the way that they use their finances, right? So not even talking about politics, but conservatism, being very conservative with their finances, not wanting to invest or spend too much, or when they do make their investments, it's very safe investments, very low risk. Typically, a low risk investment is associated with a lower return on your investment as well. Higher risk, higher return on your investment. And there's room for both types of investments, those that are more risky and those that are less risky. Typically what I find is that first gen clients that I have will typically be working a professional job that requires a degree because they feel very safe there. And I think that's a reflection of that immigrant conservative mindset of maybe don't start your own business. It's a very risky concept. Make sure that you go to school, guaranteed job after that, which I think is becoming less and less true now in today's day and age. Be careful with any type of risky career moves. Make sure you're either studying to become a doctor, lawyer, accountant, that kind of stuff. And so I would say conservatism is probably the biggest common factor that I see across first-gen clients and immigrants.
You mentioning the becoming a career that your first-gen clients believe like that's going to be, like a retirement plan, essentially. I see that. So you say that and it resonated with me. I feel that a lot of first-generation families are looking at money as the scarcity mindset. And then there's just this huge weight of responsibility placed upon the younger generation that they may not know what are their resources for retirement, I feel like. Mm-hmm. So they place that huge responsibility on their younger generation to have a career that can allow them that future, that peace that they're seeking.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'm going to restate that because I think it's just so important. And the way that I've heard it before is like, and we joke about this amongst my 4 siblings, mm-hmm. like we are our parents' retirement plans, right? They don't have any money set aside for retirement. They don't have access to a career where they were encouraged to open up a retirement account, start contributing some of their savings towards that. And so amongst the 5 of us, we are our parents' retirement plan. I mean, I have legitimately been told by my dad that like we will take care of him when he's older. And he just said it just so blunt and direct like that. And mm-hmm. It's not a problem. I mean, we're family, we love each other, we get along. So it's not a problem from that sense. But as first generation Americans now or Latinos, do we want to place that burden on our kids, the next generation coming after us? And with the knowledge that we have now, the answer is no, definitely not. We want our kids to be able to enjoy their life without feeling a burden of having to take care of us in our older age. And I think that's something that our parents or people who immigrated here might not have had that privilege mm-hmm. of being able to open up a retirement account, start saving towards that. They just might not have had as many opportunities.
And also I feel like there is some sort of guilt in that is also passed down. This kind of guilt of, I mean, that's a whole other topic as well, but why do so many people feel this guilt for investing towards their retirement, for saving towards their retirement? And I think a lot of it is for means of survival, of what it means to be an immigrant in America. But I'm also seeing that with the younger generation, like one generation after. I feel that there's not enough resources, as you said, to have accessibility towards savings. But I also feel like I think people get uncomfortable talking about that. And people treat like retirement like it's an abstract concept. Like, what is it? Where do we even begin? Everyone mentions it and media mentions it, but there's such complicated feelings about it. There's just so much unknown when it comes to saving. And on the other side, you talking about conservatism, there's such guilt with spending as well. Obviously, parents they're free to judge, or they're free to be fearful if you're spending your money on things that don't add benefit to your life. But there's a lot of things that we can spend on that also make our parents fear for something. And they may fear that they don't see long-term how things could be an investment. And I feel like, it's just the investment, seeing the future, better outlook. Why do you think we have such complicated feelings?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that you mentioned like spending money personally and having guilt associated with that spending, because I think I'm a big believer in when it comes to personal finances. Yes, you have to set some aside for savings and of course the necessary expenses, housing, food, that kind of stuff. But I'm a really big believer, you have to set aside a portion of your income for spending on yourself, for taking yourself out, for going out on dates, just doing things that, you're right, they're not going to add any value in the long term, but they make you happy. And that's super important too, because I think of the analogy a lot of like working out and following a fitness plan and diet plan and stuff like that. And let me ask you this. I mean, which do you think will be more successful? The person who is sticking to a consistent diet and building in one cheat day a week, compared to the person who's following the strictest diet that they can. They're struggling to keep up with it because they're not, allowing themselves that cheat day, that personal spending, let's say. And so they're constantly breaking their diet and not meeting their goals. I mean, which one do you think would sound more, successful in the long run?
Well, the first one.
Of course. And that's what people need to be doing with their finances too. They need to build in that spending for themselves because, the truth is that if you don't use it, yes, it may be passed down to the next generation, but you can't take it when you go, right? When you pass on from this world. And so you should at least use a portion of it. I'm a big believer of that. I can even give out some ranges. I mean, like 10% of what you earn, 5 to 10% of what you earn, you should set aside on a monthly basis just for spending on yourself, for going out to nice dinners, treating yourself, whatever the case might be. And also celebrate those early wins too. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur with my own accounting practice. You're a content creator. You've hit significant milestones over the last 12 months. And when you do hit those milestones, set aside some money for that too and treat yourself. It's really important to celebrate those wins, as small or as big as they might look like.
I feel the top of my shoulders tensing up when you're telling me to like celebrate those small wins, because I just feel like it's not enough for me. Like and this is like, so a little bit of background as someone that has gone through my own crazy childhood. The idea of like spending money for myself, it's such a complicated feeling. Like like this scarcity, I just feel like I need to survive. And like, I want to spend on myself so much. I want to spoil myself. I want to spoil that inner child I have in me. And I think about, what that means and how I just want to feel this safe again. But yet I'm stuck in this cycle of survival and fear. Like, okay, like you're saying that, but I'm not truly buying it. Yeah. And why is that though? Like, why is that? It's because we're just seeing the effects of, an upbringing of scarcity and how it's making me feel. When you're saying like spending money on yourself, even traveling, for example, you can learn so much about the world through traveling. A lot of people, especially, I feel like I see it a lot with people of color, like a lot of kids, they just don't take that leap yet. And I hope everyone that's listening in your early 20s, like as soon as possible, take that leap and travel. And that's one of the biggest things that I feel like I never thought I'd see the world beyond from visiting my mom or dad's hometowns. I never thought I'd ever go to Japan. And at first the idea of when you said it's going to cost us thousands of dollars to travel to these places. At first I was freaking out, but then when I actually jumped and did that, and now I don't regret it a single bit. And that was the biggest lesson I learned about, money treating myself. It was so, I feel like a new neural pathway was made in my brain. I was like, this is actually amazing. This is great. I'm learning. I'm feeding myself. I'm feeding my brain. I'm feeding my soul. I'm feeding my heart. This is insane. I never thought I could do this. I assumed traveling is for visiting hometown and making sure I'm seeing my family members, making sure I bring gifts, I remember my mom always making a checklist of gifts we need to bring back for family members that have less than me. So much guilt before that trip. And I remember being on the train. We were going on our way to Kyoto. And I was crying. I was crying because I was the first one in my family to go somewhere new, to go beyond, what it is to be in Latin America. And I got so sad that I could not bring my family with me, that I could not have more money in the world, that, my grandmother can be with me, my mom could be with me. So it's just insane. It's just insane how I can feel such a high and such a low. But I would have never experienced that if I hadn't treated myself. And well, in this case, it was a treat. It was a birthday gift from you, but I felt so much guilt going into it.
But it was also something that we were able to even take advantage of, to have that opportunity based on what our grandparents, our parents had sacrificed, to come, to change, to uproot themselves from their hometowns and make that courageous journey to immigrate to the United States and pursue those opportunities. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And we need to recognize that too. You're talking about the trauma associated with, the upbringing, and then, spending thousands of dollars on a trip just for yourself or for ourselves. And how do we justify that in our minds, right? But I think it is an important part of healing too. And I'm not saying go out there and start spending a bunch of money on yourself. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's a balance, right? Yes. Save some for the future, save some for now, and enjoy it. Part of spending that money on yourself, it's part of the healing process, at least from my perspective, because when people do that, I mean, sometimes they feel that they don't spend money on themselves because they don't deserve it, that they're undeserving of being able to celebrate their work or the work of their parents, things like that. But and I grew up actually with a similar mindset, and I had to unlearn that. And when I first unlearned that I am deserving of people wanting to give gifts, money, time, whatever it might have been, once I started accepting that more, I got a lot more opportunities, and actually I got a lot more money as well. Not because I was asking for it. I was never asking for it, anything like that, but because I was willing to accept it. And I was willing to accept that the universe, God, whatever higher being you believe in, is offering that to you, and you just have to be willing to accept it. And so accepting it and then spending it is a way of empowering yourself and healing from those traumas that, people might have grown up with as first generation Latinos.
Beautifully said. Big concepts, but now bring it back. So how can our girlfriends learn from this?
Yeah, put me in the hot seat.
Yeah, how can our girlfriends learn from this? Okay, of everything we're discussing, so then in that case, it's not just treating yourself, it's also about the savings, the investments, what is going to help us in our future, whether it's such as emergency funds, the importance of it. So what are small, actionable steps now that we can take that can help us and to help us shift from survival to stability?
So I would typically start with a 3-step process. The first step is establish that emergency fund. This is a fund that you would want to set aside, open up a savings account somewhere with either your bank, whatever bank, or even an online banking account. They have a lot of those now. And typically you want to set aside around 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses in this savings account. That's your emergency fund. A lot of people, when they're starting out, what I tell them is just set aside, try to hit $1,000. I mean, take maybe 10% of your income, if it's a paycheck or monthly basis, set that aside into your savings account, your emergency fund, until you hit $1,000. And then once you hit $1,000, depending on what else you have going on, the second step would be take a look at credit cards, debt, car loans, mortgages, that kind of stuff. Credit cards are probably one of the most expensive forms of debt because their interest rates on an annual basis will typically hover between 20 to 30%, which is huge.
A lot of families believe that credit cards are damn near the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear with them. And I mean, rightfully so. A lot of them are predatorial.
Yeah, they can be predatorial, definitely. And they're totally expecting you to rack up that debt, right? That's exactly what that predatorial sense is coming from. Credit cards, when used correctly, can also provide a lot of rewards. However, starting out with your personal finance journey, what I would recommend is try to pay your credit cards off on a monthly basis. Try not to carry a balance longer than a month because then you'll start to accrue interest and have to pay, interest that you could have been saving back in your pocket and setting aside towards different savings accounts or goals. So credit cards, that would be the second step. Manage your credit cards. If you have any debt that's ongoing longer than a month on your credit cards, start to work on paying those down. Things like car loans, mortgages, they can be okay to have. It's a lot easier, of course, to pay for a car over 5 years than it is in one big payment. So that's why car loans exist, of course, because they're a tool. And depending on what the interest rates are in the current economy, stuff like that, it can make sense to hang on to that debt. And they can actually improve your credit score too, which is important. The third thing I would mention after you manage your credit card debts, after you've established your emergency fund, is now start saving towards some of your goals. So if traveling is something that you want to do, if you want to purchase a house, start setting aside that down payment. Retirement is a big one. I always recommend, you save a portion for retirement. And so if I could break it down into 3 actionable steps, it would be set up your emergency fund, manage your credit cards if you have them, or if you're carrying debt, and then start setting aside savings towards any of your savings goals.
And then for the savings goals, a big one that I talk about a lot because we're all like, what is this? Me and my friends, you've heard it multiple times. Okay, so Roth IRA, retirement. What point in that 3-step do we start considering that?
That would be the third step. So contributing towards your saving goals. Retirement should always be on everyone's savings goals list, right? So people want to save for a house. They want to save maybe for a nicer car. They should also be saving for retirement always, every single time. The Roth IRA, so Roth IRA, is a specific type of retirement account. There's also traditional IRAs. IRAs are great because anyone can open them up. You don't have to be an employee of a business. If you're self-employed, if you're receiving cash under the table.
Self-employed. So which one's this one again? Repeat that.
So the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA, they're 2 types of IRA accounts or IRAs, and they work both for self-employed individuals or people who are working like a regular W-2 job, even someone who's getting paid under the table, which as a CPA, I would never condone, right? But it happens and it's out there. So what's nice about the IRAs is that you can contribute it no matter what your source of income is. The alternative to an IRA is typically a 401k. That is only typically set up by an employer, by a business organization that's offering that as a benefit to their employees. For self-employed individuals, they can also try to set that up for themselves. But the IRA is a lot more accessible and anyone can open one. Anyone can start contributing towards their savings. The difference between Roth and traditional has tax nuances associated with it. Probably be worth getting into in another episode. But the Roth IRA is a great entry-level retirement account that people should definitely take a look at.
Thank you so much. Sorry. I'm still getting used to getting my thoughts in order because you'll speak, and while you're speaking, I feel like my brain just goes all these different directions of what I want to ask. But everything you're saying is going to be greatly appreciated. I hope you know that because there's so many people that do not know enough about this. There's so many people that are going to be in high school that should know these terms, like knowing what the 3 steps that you said is brilliant. It's easy, it's actionable, it's bite-sized for someone to understand towards what they can start doing towards financial freedom. And thank you so much for explaining what is a Roth or traditional, and between the Roth, traditional IRA, and then credit. The credit card thing is so important to mention in that 3-step, paying it down. But So banks are intimidating. Banks
Yeah.
are intimidating, like everything that we're talking about. But the elephant in the room for me is that growing up and I was the English speaker in the family. Oh, that was intimidating to be a kid. And then my grandma's looking at me and like, ¿qué dijo? And for some, because my grandma knew a lot of English, but there were still some terms that she needed help on. And then all of a sudden I'm trying to translate, for her, and whether to make withdrawals, deposits. And leading up to this, now you would think I would know more about what are questions when would I go to a banker, what questions I would ask a banker for my savings. But I'm still confused. I'm still as confused as a 7-year-old I was at the bank with my grandma. What questions should I be asking my banker when it comes to my options for savings?
Yeah. And this is a great question because we live in a very different age than what it was like for your grandma to go and have a relationship with a banker, right? We live right now in the age of the digital age of online banking. I would say something that I've been learning and kind of paying attention to is that the relationship of the banker to its clients, the bank's clients, has actually kind of devolved over time, where before, like a manager at a bank would be responsible for approving mortgages, business loans, lines of credits, those kinds of things that people depend on to fulfill their business needs or get a home or things like that. Now that has evolved in today's day and age where the manager isn't so much someone who's managing those loan applications or applications in general for credit. Now they're more of like an administrator role where they're managing maybe the rest of the bank tellers or other people on the team internally at the bank, and they're not so much interfacing with their clients anymore. And so the questions that you might want to ask your banker or the relationship that you should look for with your banker, it really depends on what kind of bank you're working with. A bank like Wells Fargo or Chase, they're huge. They're national, in some cases international, right, with access to ATMs and those kinds of things. You're not going to have as valuable as a relationship there as you would with a local credit union or a local bank that has a relationship within the community. And I think this is really important. And we learned this a lot during the pandemic as well, where people want to connect with their local community. They want to help small businesses. And if they can buy groceries from the local farmer at their farmer's market as opposed to a supermarket at Vaughn's, something like that, they will go to that farmer, 90% of the time, I would say. And so it's the same thing with the bank. It has to be a local bank. And you can actually ask this question to that banker, and a good banker will tell you, this is what you should know about a relationship with a banker and using your bank. You won't get that so much at Chase or the other big banks. So I would say just focus on something local. There's no specific questions that I would recommend besides asking that banker themselves, hey, what should I ask you? And they should be pretty forthcoming with that information.
I love that you mentioned you make that comparison, like going towards building a relationship and how that could be like when you're buying from someone. I believe you said farmers market. Yeah.
Yep.
I love that you say that because I think that's another thing too that I feel like growing up I didn't quite learn is building relationships with professionals that are supposed to be lifelong relationships. I've learned now as an adult that I did not know as a kid. You grow up thinking the most important relationships you're going to have are the platonic relationships you have with friends, the love you share with friends, your little village of your family members and your partners that you have in your life. It's important to not only create platonic relationships, romantic relationships, but also relationships that are going to help you throughout your life when it comes to your money.
Yep.
So that is extremely important because you're right. There's no way I would go to a bank that's intimidating. This stranger is going to tell me everything I need to know about my money. They don't know my story. They don't know my lifestyle. They don't know my spending habits. And I'm just supposed to trust them. And I can see why my parents have the hesitation, how my mom was like up in arms. Like I felt like I would watch her to be a lot more reserved, her and my grandmother. And I don't want to be like that. I want to have these easy conversations. I want these conversations. I want to be able to be damn near vulnerable with the person that's seeing my finances. They're seeing such an intimate look into my life. And I want to make sure I have a relationship. I want to make sure I know where my money's going towards. So I love that you say that, like starting out small. That I feel, I think that means so much. It kind of feels like it contributes more to your little village than
Definitely. Definitely. Yep. Yeah. That banker at a local bank will value your relationship so much more than someone at Chase. I mean, and I'll say this as someone who banks with Chase.
Yeah.
Right? They have no idea what the
Yeah.
heck's going on in my life. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
There's so many more subjects that we have still waiting for us. And I honestly think that with this podcast episode, it's our first episode together, and
Yeah.
I'm over the moon to be doing this with you. And unfortunately, I think we do have to cut this and we can go on to part 2 because I want to go towards these recaps because it's such important information you have educated me on. And if it's okay with you, can we go ahead and make this as part 1? Let's recap what you have said. So, everyone listening, my girlfriends, they can make sure they have these important information, these facts down. And then for our second episode, then we can continue this conversation of money, the generational traumas, and how we heal, and how we're healing together as a couple talking about finances. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, definitely. There's so much that we couldn't get to in this episode. We definitely have to do a second part.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, just to go back and like kind of recap a little bit of everything that we talked about.
What bank should I use if I'm not in a union?
If you don't have access to like a local credit union because they have very specific membership requirements, there's a lot of local banks out there. I mean, you do have to do some research and find local banks. Try to Google local banks near me, or a great one to start with is like whatever city you're in, Google that city name and bank. Let's say for someone that lives in the city of Los Angeles, they might Google the city of Los Angeles bank, and you'll find a local bank called City of Los Angeles Bank by doing that kind of research. So I would say start by doing research, Google, your city bank, and then go from there. And when in doubt, you can always go with one of the biggest banks around. I mean, Chase, Wells Fargo, those kinds of banks, they're big for a reason, right? And it's because they have a lot of clients that they have, and they do a good job of providing, banking services to those clients. And so you're always going to be safe there with one of those. Won't be the most valuable relationship, but it's a great place to start.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's so much we talked about. It's so much. Thank you. Again, thank you to you. And thank you, Cal State Fullerton, for
bringing us together.
Yeah, bringing us together and giving you all this important information. Oh my God.
Well, and thank you too, because your experience, what you bring to the table with your American Studies background, and of course, your upbringing is really relevant, I think, to a lot of our audience, our listeners, and just people out there. And so for them to be able to have someone that they can relate to that's on this platform, voicing those questions, asking those questions, I think is super important.
I appreciate you so much because I definitely feel that imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm not the right person to be asking these questions. I feel like there should be a finance bro in this chair ready with these questions that has had many years of experience on a podcast. This is intimidating for me.
You are the exact perfect person to be on this podcast because of exactly that. There's so many people who are in your exact shoes that did not grow up studying, finances and accounting and everything like that need to be asking these questions. And so it's actually perfect for you to be here.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to say a closing reflection.
Yeah.
And then I will give it back to you for your recaps because I interrupted you about the question for the bank without a union.
Mm-hmm.
So for what I will say with this episode before I hand it off to close with you is that everything you're telling me is everything I wish I had growing up. I wish I had this knowledge growing up. And what you say, knowledge is power. Knowledge is a privilege. And this education is a privilege. And I appreciate you taking time today. And I appreciate the privilege that I have to be here today and talk about this and enlighten myself with this. And I am, with this podcast, again, I really want it to be something that I wanted to bring awareness with this episode. I want to bring awareness because I want to bring about that change. I hope that someone realizes with reflection with what they can learn from this podcast or elsewhere. There are fantastic books about topics like this. My therapist included has recommended me Psychology of Money, or to even start the conversation of generational trauma. It didn't start with you, I believe. And I hope that people can learn and people can unlearn. And through this podcast and through other resources of what no longer serves them, what serves us, so we can embrace this new path towards financial freedom. And with our episodes from here on out, I hope bigger picture is that our generation redefines what it means to be successful and what it means to create such a beautiful life for ourselves, and to not be so caught up on this guilt and to not be so caught up in survival mode that depletes us, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I know just as much as the next person how exhausting it is to live out of survival and I hope that we let that go and instead we learn to thrive. We learn to thrive with grace towards ourselves for not knowing what we know now. So again, can you please give a recap, just because I know my girlfriends are going to I can hear them already saying, wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to say, to add on to your point, you're saying that you wish you had this information when you were younger. That's exactly why I became an accountant, because I wish, my parents being entrepreneurial, I wish they had someone that they could rely on to ask questions as they were going through the motions of running their own businesses. So yeah, I stand with you on that 100%. Now, to recap what we covered in this episode, I would say it started with kind of the emotional tie to money and how that can be influenced by generational traumas or traumas that we've experienced during our upbringing. Money is kind of a tool. For some people, it's a release. For other people, it's a very big source of stress. And so you have to learn how to manage your relationship with money, with all that being said. In terms of kind of the first 3 actionable steps you should take as you're going through your personal finance journey, establish that emergency fund savings. That's super important. Learn a little bit more about credit card debt, manage your credit card debt. Try not to carry debt longer than a month. You should always be paid off at the end of each month so you can avoid paying interest. And then start saving towards your goals. Retirement being one goal, maybe a house as another goal, travel, trips as another goal. Start saving towards those goals after you've accomplished the first 2 steps. And then, there's a lot of questions that people, like your friends had great questions. I'm sure the audience will have questions as well.
I would love to hear more from the audience. If you guys have even more questions about this, please ask away. Like, this is our intention. This is our intention here. Let's open these dialogues. I want to have such fruitful conversations with everyone.
Exactly what I was going to say. Drop a comment for sure. We will be looking at the comments. I would even encourage them to email us. And
yes.
So we'll drop our emails in the description or something where they can contact us, or even we should
we'll put our contact information, our socials. I also want to say that in the era that we are in social media, I do believe there's a lot of misinformation going around in social platforms such as TikTok, for example.
Yeah.
And it's something, because I know you brought it up as memes that are on Reddit about finance. TikTok
tax advice.
Yes,
that's
TikTok tax advice that sometimes does not apply to everyone. Is that possible? Maybe we can do this as an episode, or I would love if you can link resources. So anyone that has access to a phone, to the internet, can start following creators that are not just ourselves, but other creators that have, a longer experience about this expertise.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard for me because I don't have social media, right?
Oh my gosh, that's right.
So okay, I'm not very...
Okay, background. He deleted his social media, not because of me, but not because of me, all those memes that go around about having a man. Yeah, having a man about social media. No, you deleted your social media because you were studying for your CPA exam. I had no idea, by the way, the CPA exam was as basically a bar for professionals. It's insane. So I forget, but Reddit, social media. You technically have social
Reddit.
media.
Yeah, Reddit is a form of social media. I am.
You have YouTube.
Pretty active on there. I am posting on YouTube.
Okay, then let's link on YouTube.
Yeah.
Let's link resources from YouTube.
And I would love to hear like what people are following out there too, like on TikTok, and then if I can prove it or disprove it, right?
Yes.
So like myth busting on some TikTok tax advice would be super fun, I think. So definitely, be engaged. We're active in the comments. We'll respond to emails, stuff like that. So
yes.
don't hesitate to reach out to us.
And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out, and don't hesitate to ask questions that don't even have to do about money.
Yeah.
I'm in it for the long haul. I want to, if you have advice as, whether it's relationship advice or whether it's advice as first gen college graduates, just about anything that you want to hear from us, I would greatly appreciate. I'm honored, first of all, that you would even ask such questions to me. But yeah, please go ahead and bring it on over to the comment section.
I just have to mention too, really quick. I'm also very committed into this life and the next. And yes, we would love to hear your questions. And again, it doesn't have to be anything related to finance. I mean, there's so many nuances to navigating a relationship, living in the United States, being first generation. We're open books.
Yes, and healing from trauma. You'll see throughout the next episodes that we create. The next episode is going to be a part 2 of unlearning so much negative habit that we've created from the generational trauma regarding money and how it affects us. We will definitely dissect that. We will dissect how it affects us as individuals on a deeper level and how it affects us as a couple, and how we interact with each other and how we talk about such heavy topics. Because finances is a heavy topic, and it's insane how much my chest is even tightening up right now, just bringing that up as a subject. And that's why we have to get into it. That's why we have to get into it for the next episode.
Definitely.
So thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it's our first episode.
Yeah, congrats.